it into it. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Hassan. Thank you very much. Uh, it's a continuous session. So thank you for your patience, all the participants and the speakers, because it's a long session. So thank you for your patience. Okay, so shall we invite our new speaker, Alex Goma? Yep. Can you make a speaker? So shall we? Yeah. So if Deep, if you can make Mr. Alex. Yeah. So I would like to invite Mr. Alex Goma. So he is very seasoned professional in business management, led multiple companies to succeed in Africa and other part of other part of the world. Okay, so he's joining us from Nigeria. Wonderful. Have made multiple strategy transformations successful. So he was a CEO of Brand Cereals earlier. Now he is in Lagos Business School and multiple. I think we can hear more from you, Alex. Okay, so your CV is so exhaustive we cannot explain. So I'll leave it to you. Please give a quick introduction and then please continue. Yeah.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining from in the world. My name is Alex. Like Shaikh said, I used to manage Grand Cereals. I've had extensive experience working with Procter & Gamble, Diageo, PZ Cousins in Nigeria, in Egypt, in Ghana, in Senegal, and Mauritania. So what I'm going to be doing today is to share some of my experiences, especially in strategy and how strategy and execution is driven by alignment across the entire business. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Alex, yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is basically how do we get strategy executed well? If you look across a large number of companies, we will find out that everyone says virtually the same thing. We want to be the best in the service or product that we offer. We want to have the best people. We want to have the best services and everything. How then do we have the difference in results? I think it comes from the fact that those who choose to execute what they say they will do are the ones that make a difference. So we're just going to talk about what is strategic alignment, how do we approach this alignment from a holistic perspective, what are the likely impacts on business results, what are the challenges that lead to this lack of alignment. There are certain tools that are available for building alignment, and then I'll share one example from my past where having the right kind of alignment led us to achieving tremendous results, and also an example from my past where because we couldn't get the alignment we wanted, we were not able to deliver the results that we wanted. But basically, strategy is about a set of agreed choices, and most businesses always have a clear set of choices or agreed strategy that they want to execute. Depending on the type of the business or the size of the business or where the business is, be it a global company, multinational, or a local business, the challenge is usually coming from how is that vision starting from the top going to be executed by the people who are running the business, and that's where you have the execution gap. And one of the key drivers of this execution gap is the fact that there's a lot of misalignment across functions of the businesses. If you're not careful in running a business, sometimes some of the functions actually become an entity of their own or a business unit of their own, and therefore do not focus on the overall. And if they become too powerful or are not willing to align with the rest of the business, you will find out that your results are suboptimal, irrespective of whether the team is a fantastic team or the people that you have are great. So alignment is simply ensuring that every element of the organization is synchronized towards a certain goal. In a lot of business organizations and meetings, we always strive to get alignment, but I think we underestimate the amount of effort that is required to get alignment. So we end up settling for agreement. We get into a meeting and everybody agrees. Why? We don't want the dispute. We don't want the real challenge that goes into ensuring that we've understood all the challenges, the constraints, the opportunities, and we've put them into consideration when we're making a clear set of choices. It means that you have to take into consideration some of the challenges people have, some of their distrust, some of the things that disturb them. If we don't discuss this, we don't bring it out in the open, what you're going to end up finding is people can say yes because they don't want to be different from every other person in the room. But again, once it goes down their teams, whether you have a lot of people who are saying yes, but actually not aligning, what then happens is that you don't get the kind of results. So critical to ensure that leadership team is aligned and they are champions of the organizational strategy, not just their functional strategies. It means every leader has to be backing the other functional head when he's not in the room. The goals, the objectives, the values, cultures, and resources are aligned. All the operational activities are working together to achieve the same vision. So everyone within the organization, in the ideal situation, should understand what you're focused on, should understand what the priorities are. This then ensures that the right resources are allocated to support all the key critical strategic actions and things that support the overall direction. There has to be a very clear communication plan and strategy to ensure that you have understanding and coordination. Communication is critical because it's not just enough for the leadership team to understand and maybe their one level team below to understand. You have to actually make sure that it is cascaded down the chain and there's a clear and common understanding of what this means. So what I've seen in a number of instances, even in well-run businesses, is the fact that the strategy documents remain things that either sit on walls or that are framed on dashboards and websites. But when it comes to actual understanding, at the end of the chain or at the bottom of the chain, people don't actually understand what it means. And then, of course, performance management is therefore linked with all the key strategic objectives and reviewed regularly. Again, I've seen instances where businesses will have the strategic direction, the actions, but then when it comes to performance management, there's no coordination or correlation between that and what everybody is trying to deliver. So the holistic approach just is more of an integrated framework where everybody understands their role in achieving the shared goals. It means that we have to take into consideration what the entire business is trying to do. We have to understand the vision and values, and we've got to be able to interpret it in such a manner that everybody understands what it means. Again, one of the gaps I've seen, especially in value statements for a lot of businesses, they sit at a very high level. So it's very difficult for somebody who manages himself to understand what does this mean for me? Because the language is too high level. So how does the gate man, how does the cleaner, how does the person, the technician in the workshop, how does the customer service person translate what this value means for me in the way I execute my job? So that has to be done to ensure that you have the right employee involvement. And of course, how you leverage technology and systems and tools that allow you to integrate your business together to help ensure that this comprehensive perspective of how we run the business actually runs through the entire business. Next is to ensure that the planning is integrated. So there's a lot of cross-functional collaboration when you're planning rather than silos, and you don't end up with functions pointing fingers across each other, especially when issues arise. Rather than working on them as a collective, each function is trying to find who was responsible for the fault, rather than looking at how do we together work towards this. One easy example I've always used for my team is the fact that I said, look, I've worked in supply chain before. I've also worked in the commercial functions. And typically, where you don't have alignment of demand and supply, you start to have a battle that runs through 18 months. You have overcapacity, and the supply guys blame the commercial guys that you guys are not doing anything. That's why we can't sell. And then, of course, they push and push and push. And after 18 months, okay, you have some headway. And then, of course,
اسمه بتاع امانه جده يا عبد الكريم
and then the
عبد القادر الشيخ
the commercial team starts to drive growth, and then all of a sudden the capacity is overstretched and the finger starts to point either way, rather than everyone working together in a collective manner to ensure that the planning for the next phase of either growth or investment is actually done jointly. So cross-functional collaborations, alignment of departmental plans with overall strategy and what everybody is trying to do. And then, of course, having a balanced scorecard approach where all the internal processes and measures are aligned to the external results that you're looking for, and how everyone knows this is their role and the way they impact and affect the overall results that the business gets. What's the impact of this approach on businesses? Where this has happened and has been run well, in my experience, we've seen better financial performance because you're better able to harness your resources, you're better able to channel your resources and your investments in the areas that will give you the maximum results. You're also able to drive efficiency and productivity because you're able to optimize your resource, you're able to ensure that, okay, the resources are allocated in the right manner. And of course, it drives employee engagement because they can see their contribution to the achievement of the overall, and they can also see the fact that they are consulted in building up. And also when your communication downwards, when things happen, their views and feedback is taken. The fact that you listen to them and you can also come back to them and tell them that, yes, we agree with this. No, we're not going to do this because of X, Y, Z reasons, makes them feel better. And of course, the overall outcome is the fact that your customers and stakeholders get better satisfaction because the entire business is focused on delivering on the external, which is what results in you having your financial performance improved. Why does this lack of alignment happen? First level is at the leadership level where the leaders are not aligned. So there are instances where it appears as if some functional goals seem to be in conflict with each other. Simple example could be, okay, supply chain is driving a cost-cutting initiative, but HR is trying to say, okay, we want to drive employee engagement. And they do not understand how will we be cutting down people and how do we get engagement. And so it seems as if it's at cross purpose. If you don't have the alignment together to agree that this is what we're going to do and this is how each one of us is going to support this. Yes, we're going to go through this cost cutting, but how do we do it in a manner that still supports employee engagement? And how do we drive employee engagement and letting people understand that, you know, cutting down costs or taking some drastic actions is really necessary for the survival and the future and the growth of the business. So it is critical to ensure these discussions happen, and when they happen, all the elements are put on the table and trashed, and therefore we can have everybody moving together. If you just sit on the level of agreement, it is easy to say, yes, we agree, and then at the back end, you find out that nothing is happening, and therefore you don't get that alignment. Silo mentality. Some functions run as a separate army from the other, and therefore they will only take orders or direction. This is especially critical where you have a local structure and a global structure. So you may have some functions reporting to the local entity and at the same time reporting to the global function. Where these global functions are very powerful, sometimes it starts to undermine the ability of the local team to execute and deliver the results. So if this doesn't happen, then you start to find out that some of the results locally or some of the results globally will be impaired because either the local team do not believe in the vision that the global guys are pushing, or the global guys are pushing one particular agenda, and therefore there's no consistency of effort across the entire organization. A lack of understanding because of different interpretation of strategic goals. This sometimes can happen at subordinate levels. So it is critical that when goals are written and the leaders agree, there's a channel through which this is discussed and cascaded down the levels of the organization. It is critical that we break it down, we address their concerns, and we help everyone to understand that. This takes time to happen, and sometimes I think the quest for speed means that we tick the boxes. So we just get everybody to say yes. We don't really deal with the real issues and we just park them aside. And what then happens is when we meet the first roadblock, the employees therefore start to back off. Well, it takes a long while before we realize this is happening. At that time, sometimes it might be too late for the business to be able to change direction. And of course, one of the other elements is the resistance to change. Normally, change is difficult. People, once they get used to a particular way of acting, you have to learn to sell them the reason why the change has to happen. This is again something that senior leadership have to learn to do. We don't drive change or force change down the throats of people. We've got to sell them the benefits of change. Why is change critical? If we don't bring them into the space where they will recognize that change is an absolute requirement for us, and then we show them that change is possible and show them how we are going to navigate the change and the benefits of the change, it becomes difficult for people to understand and accept why they have to take these particular actions. Now, what are some tools that are necessary or critical or that have helped build alignment? Strategy maps help where you have tools that allow a clear representation of the objectives of the business, the linkages between goals and impacts of all of those linkages. It helps everyone understand their role and alignment across the organization. Again, the process of business and operational planning where cross-functional teams work together. And it is not just for the sake of the meetings, it's actually the real work happening outside of the meetings. I've seen business planning processes set up where it is centered around the meetings, and the meetings are not meant to do the work. The meetings are where you take real decisions. The work happens outside of the meeting. Therefore, it means the collaboration and everything has to happen so that the meetings become effective for decision making. So where there are conflicts across business units, across departments, this is where you start to drive this. And you can therefore use this integrated approach to break down silos. And the last is the use of tools like balanced scorecard. So these are tools that a lot of businesses use to measure outcomes. Again, the key thing is to work this both top down and bottom up, and critical to ensure that the assessment of the results, the most critical actions within the business, the most critical results are the ones that are put high up, and therefore we start to drive that. Again, I've seen balanced scorecards just done as an initiative without a link either to strategy or without a link to performance management and how everything works together. So it becomes a tool or an industry of its own, rather than it supporting, right, your development. If your strategy is not clear, if your strategy is not well built, having a balanced scorecard will only just measure something that doesn't add value to your business. So before you start thinking of introducing things like that, make sure that you've walked through the elements of your strategy and how the alignment will happen, and then the balanced scorecards help you to look at how you can drive that. So An example of where we had this, one of my roles in the past, a global company with a big local organization in Nigeria. I was sales director in that business. We were a new leadership team that came together, and the first year we struggled because everybody was working on its own. Sales was saying, you guys just go get the volume, supply chain did what they want. And then we had one day where we were going to just have a normal review and everything broke down. So we put aside the agenda of that particular meeting. We were lucky we had the help of a leadership coach who was working with the executive team. And we then basically sat down and started to look at how we were going to behave, who we had to become as a leadership team, and how we're going to get the rest of our team to work together. And so started with supply chain and sales, and then of course HR and marketing. And at the end of that session, we gave each other the permission to go into every other person's function, and therefore there was openness in sharing information in alignment. We took it one step further by creating a team of extended leaders who we felt were the ones going to drive execution across the business. And we had regular reviews. We then did, we used the mission analysis approach to put all the various plans together. And then we started to execute. And different leaders adopted different teams in other parts of the business that were not necessarily in their functions to ensure that we could actually contribute and participate. And then we put out a 3-year ambition. And we now started to drive this execution month by month. Where we faced challenges, we looked at it as a whole. Initially, it was tough because it was easy for people to go back to old behavior, but we always had to remind ourselves, no, this is what we've chosen to do. At the end of the day, by the time we were in the 2nd year, we started to turn around the business, and basically, to cut the long story short, in 3 years, we doubled the business. How did this happen? We clearly aligned the strategy. We looked at some of the things where we had challenges. We worked with the global team to align them, to get them to understand that we were not going to do anything outside of the things that we agreed. We worked with teams underneath us to make sure that we agreed on everything, and where there were challenges, we approached them as a whole, and we stopped trying to point a finger at which function. We had dashboards that was put in every functional leader's office at the end of every month, the guys that were measuring business performance. So we could see the way we started to migrate from a dashboard of reds to ambers, and then all of a sudden everything was green. And that's when we started to see the turnaround in the business. But we had to lower down egos, we had to put everything together, and we had to use some of the tools to ensure that, okay, we could start to drive the alignment together and get correct and complete communication. It was tough. There are times when we just had to tell each other, look, you know what, we've put in these efforts, the results have not come, but let's just keep faith. And let's just keep faith, because it takes a while for especially some of the fundamental changes that you're doing at the grassroots level to actually start to bear roots. So it takes discipline from the leaders not to go and shake the bottom. It's like planting a crop and you go in every 2 days to see if it's germinated and you're digging the soil. No, you've got to understand that this particular crop will take 2 months to germinate. So you know what, just keep on wetting the ground and putting the fertilizer, and just keep on doing all the other things rather than going every 2 days to dig and see whether it is growing or not. That was the approach we took. Results successful. Second company also worked here for a couple of years, global organization, local entity. Our business performance was inconsistent. We would have a year of good performance and then a year of bad, poor or mediocre performance. We would take a couple of actions, we will recover, we will go to and fro. But along this couple of years, every time we will address org structure, review, change the structure, should we look at the strategy? But the biggest difference was lack of alignment. Some of the global SBUs were so strong that they basically ran what they felt was the right thing, irrespective of whether the commercial teams felt that this was best for the market. No, as far as they're concerned, we have to cut down costs, no matter whether it affects what we're going to do with the business. So what then happened is we will sit in a meeting, we'll have a review, everybody will look at the plans will look very good, but the time and effort to get everybody to discuss these differences was bypassed. And so what happened was we just had agreements. Everybody said, yes, fantastic. The plans look good on paper. And then we struggled. And we struggled. And each time when things were going bad, you have that brief period where we will all come together to rescue the year. And then all of a sudden, once the year was over, we went back to the bad performance again. We tried to put business planning, tried to put some centralized working together. All didn't come to avail because there was clarity, a lack of alignment by the senior leaders, which of course drove lack of alignment across key functional leaders and department heads locally. Some of the guys locally reported to the center, didn't report, had a dotted line reporting to the local team, and therefore, as a result, we had things going. Basically, to cut the long story short, the business results remained largely inconsistent over 10 years. I think at the end of the period, a number of people left, there were changes in the business, and looking from an outside in, I've seen that they've started to work things together, and some of the things that were difficult to execute, they're beginning to do some of those things and take some of those tough choices. So critical to ensure you have alignment. If you don't have alignment, you're going to see the impact in your results. You're not going to have consistency. You're not going to have the best results possible. So just to summarize, businesses desire sustainable growth, and usually if I look across the websites and strategy documents of a lot of companies, they all say the same thing. We want to have the best in different words. The key gap between that aspiration and results is driven by the quality of execution, and usually it's hampered either by not having the right resources or there's a lack of strategic alignment. Alignment takes time, alignment takes effort, alignment takes putting people together to agree to disagree and then finally move all their resources in one direction. Strategic alignment results when all elements of the strategy are coordinated to drive delivery. Lack of leadership alignment, a silo mindset, and poor communication are very big barriers that prevent businesses from having the right alignment. And then shared vision, goals, tools supported by integrated business planning and balanced scorecards are tools that support strategic alignment. In my last role, I think I worked with Shaik and his team in trying to put some of the elements of trying to organize a strategy together, right? We put the framework and everything, but we were still working the bits before I left the business. But I think they have some of a fantastic tool that helps businesses drive and support that strategic alignment across their business. So thank you for your attention, and if there are any questions, I am willing to take them now.
Yeah, there are a few questions, Alex. Fantastic presentation. You really shared real insights the organizations face in practice. So I liked one thing before taking up questions. You said companies start something called Balanced Scorecard project. So that is really funny. Okay, so it happens, by the way. So people all of a sudden they decide that let us go for a Balanced Scorecard project. Okay, so without having any proper strategy description, proper strategy management, strategy plan, so they want to go for a Balanced Scorecard. So eventually they end up into a people performance one way or other, which is not really aligned to the strategy. And I hear very strong about strategic alignment, especially. Okay, so the question is, how does that in Nigeria and Africa? Okay, so what are the key challenges in the strategy transformations? Okay, do they really follow any methodology, or is it depends on the individual leadership? So how does that, Alex? I know the things are getting changed in your experience. Okay, just can you summarize for the sake of audience? Yeah.
I think you have different approaches. So for a number of companies in Nigeria where you have multinationals and parent companies, so where parent companies have these tools, right, it is easy. You find some of those tools cascaded down to the local companies and therefore, I mean, the local entities here. So you find some companies who are part of a global business applying some of these tools. I think the key gap for me is the fact that some of these tools are just dropped down. There's no willingness to have the conversation to look at the local context to say, okay, how does this apply? I use a simple example in one of my roles. Okay, these are the global strategic categories we want to work in. However, there's a local category where the business is very strong and big, which gives scale. Now, because of the scale it gives, it actually subsidizes the cost of one of the strategic elements. It therefore means that if you're going to make a decision, you've got to look at that critically, because if you discard that, then you lose the scale that gives your second category, which is strategic and important. And you know, for a year, we struggled with pricing because we said, oh, the pricing has to be this, the margin has to be this. And at a point, I had to talk with the area director to say, look, can you share me your cost structure from a global perspective, so that we can understand where it means and we can take a decision. Even if I take a hit locally, if the total system benefit is better, then we can see that. And when that was done, we took a decision. Funny enough, the decision benefited the center and it benefited the local. So what you find is, that's one particular example. The second example is sometimes the rush for speed or urgency. So people think when you apply this tool is a silver bullet. Once we start to do this, we change the performance. So when they apply and they don't see the change in performance, oh, this is not working. No, you've got to go down underneath to say, what's really the driver of your performance and how do we fix that? And then how do we use this tool to ensure we never get in that situation again? So I think those are areas where we see challenges. For the local companies, there are lots of them who just get into business. They get into a segment or category because there's an opportunity. They can grow as a result of that opportunity, but they've never really put into thought the strategy or direction. So any small hiccup in the environment, then they start to struggle. So you find new businesses start die because that lack of thinking is not there. And the last one is people. There has to be a lot of focus on people, because if you don't have the right people with the right leadership, it's not the technical skills, right? Getting alignment goes beyond technical skills. It's your ability to work with others, your ability to look and solve problems, analysis, right? These are some of the challenges where you find this lack of alignment happening, especially in Nigeria and parts of Africa.
Perfect, perfect. So for the audience sake, we work closely with Alex. He has a wonderful idea about how the strategy translation happens. So right from the organization, from the strategy plan to the translation of the strategy through balance scorecard and initiatives. I know you end up with 5 themes, winning with supply chain, Alex. That was fantastic move from you. Okay, and the way you led your team to do the things really wonderful. Okay, so very rarely you see the leadership like that. So, what are the? I know you said about the local challenges. The strategies in global does not work in the local. Okay, so you need to accommodate the real things in the people alignment. Okay, so they are fantastic points actually. Okay, so the conceptual things we can get it in any books, but these are the real great insights. So one more question from Manish is he's talking about the balance scorecard methodology or OKR methodology. How does that picking up in Nigeria and Africa? Is this something anything you would like to tell about it?
Yeah, I think the approach is coming on. Again, there are 2 approaches. There are companies who are approaching it from a performance management perspective, which in my view, I think is faulty because you're just using the balance scorecard as a performance management tool. And sometimes when you look at the initiatives, when they're broken down or cascaded down to the individuals, it doesn't really show the linkage to the strategy. I think that's where the gap is. But it's an approach that a number of organizations are using. I think the key is the rigor in trying to agree the elements of your strategy and then breaking them down into what are the key financial results that you have? What are the key internal results that you must focus on? So it's not a checklist of everything, but what are the things that really matter? And then how do you break it down to a number of results that, okay, at the function and then at the individual level that you have. I think it's having that balance that is creating a challenge, but it's a practice that is being adopted by people, but I think the results are limited depending on the approach. Those who have taken it from performance management as a HR tool or whatever, I don't think they're getting the maximum value of it. A number of people have taken it from a strategic perspective to show that they're doing the right things. The key question is the depth of going down to say, okay, how do you line it down to everything that you do and you put the right measures. I think getting some of these things to be done requires time and effort from the leadership team and everyone seeing it as their own. It's not a HR or it's not a strategy director concept. It's the business leader that has the final responsibility for that.
Fantastic. So one more question, Alex. I know you have done a great job in helping the team to define KPIs, appropriately measures. Okay, so that is something very important to define key measures, the key performance indicators or strategic measures. So now, because of the artificial intelligence and you can search anything, ChatGPT, you can get KPIs. What we see is that people don't pay attention to defining and selecting appropriate KPIs, what is required. They just go by what artificial intelligence or something recommended and they start measuring it. So in your experience, what do you advise? Is it something KPI should be selected properly with minimal number so that you can pay attention? So you have defined it for your organizations. Can you just quickly brief it?
I think you can use AI to throw up examples because what AI will do, it will tell you what happens in other parts of the world. So there's nothing wrong with borrowing from others. But you then have to localize it within your organization. What is critical? And also, there's certain KPIs depending on the level of development of your organization or where you are at a particular stage is critical. And whether you have the tools or resources to measure that. Else you end up creating an industry which doesn't add any benefit. So one of the first principles I always say is that any KPI or data that you're gathering coming from the bottom, especially from a sales rep, if it's not useful for the sales rep in making his decision and to become a better salesperson, it is useless to the company. So it is important that we start from the top, we look at what we want to drive, we look at what it means. So if I take, yes, we want to deliver X revenue, X profit, X this, why, how? We're going to do it by doing this for the customer, we're going to do it by doing this for the consumer, we're going to do it by giving this kind of service and this kind of cost. Now, how do we measure the service for the consumer? What is it that the consumer, so how do we link it to something internal? That's the kind of process that you have to go through until it comes down and then to say, okay, in the day-to-day of our people, what do we measure? How can we measure better? And what are the things we can therefore look at that adds up to this? If we have the tools, fine. If we don't have the tools, okay, are we mature enough to go through that transition? You know, some organizations will just come, okay, let's do sales automation. I said, but you don't have the right processes. You're not doing the right activities on the field. You're not looking at the right things. So if you automate rubbish, you get rubbish results, or you just get a tick box. You know, it's reports, charts, nobody's taking a decision. So good to use what exists from outside, but it should cascade from what are you trying to achieve? Pick what you can measure within your organization and then look at areas of improvement. What are critical? What are the things where you have gaps? You can start to look at the process for how you put that in place. So if we're measuring the way our sales team operates at the shop level, we've got to look at what are the kind of decisions or facts or data that they need to have to make it a call. How does this, if we cascade this from one rep through 300 rep, gives us a picture of how well we're doing? Which ones are the most critical? We can't give them 20 things to measure because then their time is spent collecting. They become a ministry of information rather than being sales people or the supply chain guys. In my experience, a lot of people don't like reporting, right? Especially commercial guys. But it's because we made it an industry. We've not shown them the utility of reporting in helping them to become better and how it helps the business. So for me, it's simplify, add, look at what you have, remove, don't make it more complex for them, but make it tailor-made to your own category, right? And to the level of your organization.
Perfect. So one more question I would like to ask. Based on your experience in sales, you understand customer very well. Okay, based on you work with the global organizations, local, everything. Now, what are just in your experience, how to define customer objectives? Okay, so customer objectives is something which is very almost always it's little open. So people are very clear about financial objectives. People are more or less clear about internal the enablers. So from when you go to the customer, so the selecting right objective, which is part of your strategy, is something which is always confusing. You want to talk about something?
I think at the customer level, you've got to look at what are you expecting, what is the role of the customer, what are you trying to drive? So if I have a distributor, for example, what am I expecting from my distributor? I need my distributor to therefore be able to distribute my product. So I need to be sure that, do I have the right availability? So am I looking at weighted distribution? That is good. For him to do that, okay, he needs to cover the outlets. So am I looking at his coverage and the quality of the coverage either by the weight? Okay, for him to be able to cover and sell, he needs to have inventory. Okay, what's the inventory policy? Is it under? Is it over? So it's those kind of measures that you can look at. What's the productivity or efficiency? Okay, yes, when they cover the outlets, okay, the sales guys make calls. Within those calls, are they able to sell? And what's the level of sales that they make? So we can measure. If I have a portfolio, are they able to sell across the portfolio? So basically for customers, you're looking across the sales drivers. What are the things that drive sales? So you can look at the output. The output is the volume or the revenue that I get from the outlet, but the process or the drivers of that output is, do I have availability? Am I making the right calls? Am I selling the right quantity out of that? Am I getting my service right? And then, of course, am I also capturing some bits and pieces of information or feedback around offtake from those particular customers? So it depends on the kind of, if it's a retailer, of course, I'm looking at, okay, the offtake from the shelf. I'm looking at my shelf space. I'm looking at my availability. I'm looking at inventory. I'm looking at lost sales, the things that ensure that, okay, I'm not losing sales from those particular outlets. So the KPIs have to be tailored to the particular customer type and their roles, what you expect them to do for you, and that's the way I would set KPIs for customers.
Perfect, sir. I would like to ask my last question to you. Being in a region where you have a lot of fluctuations in the currency rates and the other legal and compliance issues. Okay, so how do you define risk and compliances into your strategy?
I think risk, it's critical to do that because you've got to determine where the risks come in. And so if I take, like one of the examples you gave, if you take currency risk, for example, right? So if you have foreign currency risk because of fluctuations, it then means that your pricing is critical. You also then have the challenges of the local economy, all right? So how do you do pricing? There are two ways you can do pricing. One is I increase the price outright. The second is I can keep my price static, but I reduce the quantity I offer, all right? For you to be able to do that, it then means there are lead times for packaging, lead times for sizing, maybe the dyes that you might use or the equipment that allows you to use them. So when we do risk management, we will look at all of these scenarios and do a simple extrapolation. So in the past, the dollar in the last 1 year has devalued massively in Nigeria from about 448 to 1,000 naira. But I can tell you that in 2015, we had actually done scenarios to show the dollar going up to 1,000. And we had different options. If the dollar went to this amount, we were going to reduce the size of the soap from this to this.
Okay.
Or at this price point, because there's a coinage issue, we're going to increase the pricing, we're going to do. So that's the way you bring in your risk management into the way you execute. And then the choices you make for inventory. Do I keep high inventory because the price might go up and therefore I can benefit from that exchange rate? Do I price in advance of currency change? So I'm always pricing in advance so that way, by the time we're ready to pay for, I've already hedged because I've priced in advance. So these are elements that you put during your strategic planning, and therefore you put some of those decisions and then you might take some steps. Now, the lead time for some things, I'll use an example, dyes in soaps, is like 6 or 8 months. Now, because we have defined the sizes, we went ahead to order all the dyes for the different stages. So when it came to that point where the currency was at a particular level, you just press the button. But it meant, okay, these dyes, of course, are assets. You have to keep them. There has to be an agreement that we're going to keep these assets on ground so that it gives us the speed and the ability for us to be able to react immediately rather than have an 8-month lead time when the currency is fluctuating every 1 week or 2 weeks. So that's an example.
It's a really great scenario planning. You said it without saying. So scenario planning is really great. Okay, so great. Any more questions from? So there is one question. When we consult organizations, we push them to achieve our vision. How must we look to our customers? And then the client starts scratching their head because so far they have measured only customers only based on market share. Yeah. So I don't know what's the question basically. Manish, I will write it to Alex. Yeah, we'll get it answered. Okay. Okay, sir. So any final words from you, Alex? Yep.
I think for me, final words will always be, and this is what I tell any new entrants to our business, especially the graduate trainees. I say, go and check the websites of all the companies. They basically say the same thing from a strategy perspective. We'll be the best at serving our consumers, we'll be the best in serving customers, we'll offer the best supply chain, we'll offer this. I say, why do they then get differences in results? The difference is in the person who does what he says he's going to do. And in doing what you say you're going to do, you must think it through, because it's easy to write words. When it comes to execution, people run away from that. And part of that writing words and getting it done is ensuring that everybody works together to put those words together. If you put them together, you're more likely going to execute. And that's why having that alignment helps and works. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Alex, for a very insightful explanation of your experience. Okay, so really thank you very much. If there is any question, I know we'll post you. Okay, so it's a really great presentation. Thank you, Alex, for joining.
All right, then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.